Hi, I'm Shannon Miller. I'm the director of the City of San Antonio's Office of Historic Preservation.
And I'm Bobby Salucci with Texas Public Radio. Thanks for joining us for There's a Story Here, a partnership between the Office of Historic Preservation and TPR.
There's a Story Here crowdsources fun, obscure, meaningful, and previously untold stories about San Antonio's places, people, and events. You can submit your place-based stories and read what others share at essaypreservation.com/TASH.
Before each episode, we look through stories you submit and choose a few to highlight. Today, we'll look at stories related to music venues. There's some big names, a good-natured rivalry, and a business owner who provided a stage for local and touring bands for 20 years.
Our first stop is here at Randy's Ballroom on Bandera Road for a first-hand account of a raucous show that happened in January of 1978.
Hi, my name is Joe Pugliese. I was a promoter with Stone City Attractions. We did the Sex Pistols show here at Randy's Rodeo on January 8th, 1978. I came to San Antonio when I was a teenager, and I helped start Stone City when I was 20 years old. The month before Stone City's first concert, I turned 20. And so I worked for Stone City for the first 6 years they were in business up till 78. We had already been established promoters. We started doing shows in San Antonio in April of 1972. And by the time the Sex Pistols concert came around, we were doing shows in 16 markets in 3 states. But we had already started doing some new wave acts and stuff, like we did Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe in Austin. That was the beginning of the new wave, when punk was part of that. And that was the year before the Sex Pistols show. So we had already been doing some new wave concerts and not just hard rock and metal bands. The Sex Pistols manager is a guy named Malcolm McLaren. He's well known in music circles. He thought it would be a good idea to book the Sex Pistols in cowboy bars in Texas, just to see if he can cause some trouble and mix the crowds and see what happens. So we booked Randy's Rodeo here in San Antonio, even though it wasn't just Randy's Rodeo anymore. In the 60s, when I was in high school, there was a country bar, but they were doing everything back then, including bingo like they have now. Well, I'm not real sure if it was the building or not, or the country bar. That might have contributed to it a little bit, but the audience was a big mix of all kinds of people, a lot of curiosity seekers. I'd say half the audience, I think we sold 1,700 tickets, half the audience was curiosity seekers and the other half were music fans and punk fans and stuff. There's been so much written about this event in Austin. You might research Margaret Mosier's work, because she said every single person that came to this show from Austin started a band. Because there were people here that were in the Skunks and ended up being in the Textones and the Go-Go's. Kathy Valentine was here that night. Steve Earle was here. I talked to all the band members. You know, I talked to Malcolm McLaren during the course of the day. Johnny Rotten autographed a promo photo of him for me. He said Johnny Rotten was not here on it. We talked to Sid. He hung out with my brother and my guitar player and sat on the side and just chit-chatting most of the day. Right when he was going to take the stage, Sid grabbed my lead guitar player's sunglasses off his face. So those glasses he's wearing on all the San Antonio footage is my guitar player Eddie's sunglasses. See, my job that day, I closed out all the ticket outlets, and then I came here and opened up the box office and ran the box office at noon. I was in the box office till 7:25. I was on stage from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. I was back in the box office at 8:10, and then I was back on the stage helping with the set changes and everything. The reason we ended up on the bill is because I was the promoter, and me and my friends who I worked with let me put my band on the bill. And also my best friend's band, who was a hard rock band. They were called Ultra, and he was an artist and a singer also, but a performance artist. And he was wearing like pajamas and a strange hat, and the audience didn't really like either of us because we were still a glam band. We had long hair, so we weren't a pure punk band. And they hated his band because they were playing hard rock music, like twin leads and stuff. So it was kind of a little juxtaposition there. You know, everybody was anticipating the Sex Pistols, not knowing what was going to happen, and their reputation, you know, everybody was on edge. Is there going to be fighting and violence and stuff? So there was half the crowd was here to see the band. The other half was just curiosity seekers. And a lot of people didn't really know what to expect. They think they're supposed to throw bottles at punk shows, or they're supposed to do this, supposed to do that. So there was a lot of that going on. People were spitting at Sid and throwing bottles like crazy, and they thought that's what they were supposed to do. Now, the one guy that kept spitting at Sid, he got tired of it, and he took his guitar off, his bass off, and swung at the guy. It just glanced off his head, but hit his shoulder pretty hard. And then security jumped in. I happened to be on stage right where that was happening. A very well-known production guy named Chip Monk was out with the Pistols, and Chip was right there, and he jumped in the audience, and everybody grabbed the guy and grabbed Sid. And so it led into a lot of tension in the air. Plus, as you know, at punk shows, people slam dance and slam around. So if you weren't ready for that, or you weren't into that, you might have pushed some guy back, and they come back to you. And that was part of the energy of punk concerts at the time. Now, as far as my band goes, we weren't punks either. You know, we were a glam band, and the audience didn't particularly care for us too much either. You know, they were there for the Sex Pistols. They had 10 concerts booked on their tour. On this, it was their first tour, only tour, and they had 10 cities booked. And I think they played 2 before San Antonio. You could probably look this up. I'm not exactly sure. They played 2 before San Antonio. I think New Orleans and some other market, then San Antonio, then Dallas, and then they played one more town. I think it was Oklahoma, and then they imploded, and they didn't do the rest of the tour, and they were never a band again. And you know, Sid died a few months later. He overdosed just a matter of months later. Sid had a bad drug use. Some of them, other ones may have been using drugs too, but they didn't affect him as like Sid was affected by it. His performance was affected by it. You know, rumor has it others were using drugs too, but it just impaired him. I think they thought they were rock stars on the first big tour to America. They were partying hard, and he just couldn't handle it. Yeah, that's a good picture of Sid standing right between the R and the N up there, and he's giving his trademark sneer. This was before the guitar whacking incident. He took his jacket off and whacked that guy.
I just came up and upset the bass player because I knew that he knew that I meant physical harm. And I have to say I was ugly about it. But he came out and hit us over the head with a bass. He was hitting us because I was going like this. Come on, buddy. And he kept going like this. And I would have been glad to take him on or his buddy Johnny. I don't care either one. And so consequently, I was taken out of the concert.
In 1984, 2 bands of the same name met at Via Fontana, a venue in the former Pearl Brewery Pavilion at Hemisphere, to battle for the right to call themselves Slayer.
I'm trying to remember. So it was SA Slayer first, and Carrying, and the Red Force. How about I was an SA Slayer.
That's
I'm Art Villarreal. I was an SA Slayer from 1981 to early 83 or late 82. I was about 17 years old, 18 years old. It was my first real band.
My name's Bob Catlin. Some people call me Bob Dog. Different story. I was also in San Antonio Slayer with this guy, Art Villarreal. We formed it together while we were in high school.
But you and I would sit around at lunch during 8th grade lunch.
8th grade
in
lunch?
Hawaii, and talk about being in a
Middle
band.
school.
Middle school.
And fantasize about being in a rock band. His brother had a Gibson Les Paul hidden under the bed, and we would sneak in while he wasn't around to look at it and touch it. I think Art would even take it out of the case and play it.
I would try to play.
But
around
his
some
brother
notes.
was mean and scary, so we could not get caught. But this was 8th grade that he and I were going to form a band together. That ended up happening a couple of years later after we had both moved away and come back when we were actually at Roosevelt High School.
You and I were
we
practicing
were
a lot.
pretty good.
We were getting better. About a month later, I ran an ad in the Express News for looking for a bass player and a drummer. And Don called me up, and we started talking about it. And, hey, I like New Wave of British Heavy Metal and Iron Maiden. Hey, we do too. Judas Priest, blah, 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 blah. We all have the same influences. Were you guys at the flea market battle of bands? Yeah. Oh, wow, we already met you guys.
Don Van Stavern and David Wayne McLean,
We met them
for
after-
some reason, made quite an impression on us, so we stole them.
They were great. So they came over, and we were a 4-piece for about a week, and we went through the entire Iron Maiden Killers album and a couple of originals. And then I guess we took a break for a month or so. Then when we hooked up again, we formed Slayer. They had a singer in tow this time around, a different guy. Bob and I were on the phone after school, and I was just sitting in the living room talking to him about band names, and he brought up Dragon Slayer.
Ah, my song. I had a song. It had a bunch of notes, and it was called Dragon Slayer. And that,
Yeah, and
I came up with the name.
well, kind of. I suggested, why don't we just drop the dragon and just call it Slayer? So he said, okay, that's cool. So I pitched it to Don and David, and they were good with it, so it just stuck. And then the flyers started. And we saw the logo, and our buddy Ruben came up with the logo and the flyers. Like, wow, we're legit now. We're good with this. Let's keep it. It's gonna work. And that was pretty much it.
Yep. Until it
Ruben
wasn't.
did this, like- No, it was them.
And so in the meantime, we have an album, an EP, finished, waiting to be pressed for months. Where is this record, Bob O'Neill? Blah, 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 blah. And always something about the doctor, who was financing it, apparently. Well, there's this band in Los Angeles that is tearing the scene up with an incredibly aggressive form of heavy metal, and they're getting popular, and Metal Blade Records signs them. And you know, back then it was a different world, right? No one's got a phone with an internet. No one's got an internet except for scientists. Everything's done by zines and tape trading. And so their name's getting around, bigger than ours. Our name's getting around. It's the same name. Well, that's stupid, right? But we were first. But we were first, except for Bob O'Neill, the Doctor, Dutch East Indies, and Black Sabbath, for some reason, not letting my record come out. And they get signed to Metal Blade, which was a real record label. Ours really wasn't. And so Brian Slagle being the president, CEO person of Metal Blade, sends our guy a cease and desist scary letter. And he's got clout and we don't. And they're happening and they're in Los Angeles and we are happening less and we are in the middle of nowhere. Via Fontana was such a wonderful
It was a great
venue.
place. I don't remember when we first started booking there or hearing about it, but it just We got a buzz, and we started going to watch some punk shows there. It was a wonderful venue. It was mom and pop owned.
The Via Fontana was
It's an old theater.
in the
It was
parking
a
lot
playhouse.
of the. Yeah, it's an old theater that was in the parking lot of what had become the convention center and the Hemisphere, which was a strange location. It was a mom and pop hall that anyone could rent for anything. You know, bar mitzvahs, quinceaneras, weddings, whatever. All that kind of stuff happened. And in this era, the early 80s, the punk bands and the metal bands are always looking for a venue, right? The clubs don't want us.
Nope.
It's loud. The people are underage. You're going to book a band called the Black Flag. So, you know, all this was happening in weird places. Well, these people didn't care, right? They wanted to book the place for the night. They didn't care if it was a wedding. They didn't care if it was a punk band. They didn't care if it was a metal band. And so the punk and the metal started getting booked there. Via Fontana was a rectangular shaped room. The bar was on the opposite side of the rectangle than the stage, and there were balconies, and they were pretty much up there. It was about very New Orleans, very much like the Saturn Bar in New Orleans, except bigger and not as drunk. But it was a row
Maybe not up
of
to code
like
either.
a balcony, which in the theater days would have been your nice box seat. Well, at GBH and Accused, that's the perfect platform for stage diving. And I'm telling you, this thing's got to be 15 feet up, right? That was a pretty,
It's about 20, I think.
yeah, it was high. And so the first guy that did that stage dive, man, he needs a medal because that was stupid badass cool, and he probably hurt himself.
That's when this happened. So this band wasn't really even together.
We had been broken up for 3 months, actually, when Mike Solis was the promoter.
Mark. Omni
Mark.
Productions.
Omni Production. Mark Solis approached us about playing with Slayer, who were already then starting to become famous, but were not yet. And that's what most people forget. 1984 is 2 years before Slayer changes Rock and Roll Forever. And they did. They changed Rock and Roll Forever. But it's 2 years away. At this point, they're just a really good thrash band. But you know what? We're just as good. We killed that night. We killed that. We had a chip on our shoulder. We had something to prove.
Totally different
And
styles.
they're the only thing comparable between the bands
Was
is
the
the
name.
name. And the records are all about the devil.
It was a great place.
It's a great
It
place.
was a great. I'd say the occupancy was like 300 to 400, maybe 300,
I never know that. I
kind
never
of
know
ish.
that.
You could
I
pack
never
300 in there.
I
think.
know that one of the things about this gig was that it was standing room only and that there were people lined up outside. And as soon as it was no ins and outs, if you left, you were out, and they would let someone back in. And it was like that all night. And my girlfriend did not get in to hear most of our set because that's how little clout we had.
In 1965, Ramiro Ram Ayala opened Taco Land in a small building on the banks of the San Antonio River, just north of downtown. With a patio shaded by a sprawling oak, Taco Land was initially known as a hangout for working-class San Antonians and bikers.
By the 1980s, Ram and Taco Land were hosting local and touring bands, giving lesser-known musicians a chance to reach a new audience when other mainstream city venues wouldn't book them.
My name is Jeff Smith. I was originally drawn to Taco Land as a performer. We are at the original site of Taco Land right now, and the original building is gone, but now the space at 103 West Grayson Street. San Antonio is occupied by Velvet Taco.
My name is Rolan Fuentes. I am the main Taco Land instigator on the local music scene, I guess. Also known as the Night Rocker. So, Ram was one of my best friends.
Ram was unusual in his status as a club owner and the guy that was there every night, that he didn't really play music critic. I mean, he had bands he definitely didn't like. He had bands he liked a lot, but he was kind of more concerned with whether or not people showed up, of course. But I think he identified with the punk energy, even if he wasn't necessarily a punk rock fan. He liked the rebellious aspects of it.
You know, Ram was, you know, already in his 60s. All his buddies were famous Tejano stars and you know, rock and rollers from the era. You know, Doug Somm, you know, you name it. Used to hang out with Ram. He was that guy.
You know, even when I wasn't playing here a lot, I still always loved this place. But you know, I loved Ram, and it was, you know, of course, a shock that when he was murdered, and it's pretty unspeakable. And I've always thought that, you know, that night, all those bands that were ruining Ram's health all those years. I mean, if just one of those crappy bands had been playing here that night, it might have saved his life.
Ram knew everybody, I guess, or, you know, or it was just weird. You know, San Antonio's a small town back then. You know, and this circle that they created was not very big. You know, it was a tight little family. I'm sure there's probably other clubs out here in this town that have the same knit little family, but Taco Land was a little different. You know, Ram, you know, was the magnet. He kept, you know, he was the guy that drew everybody to him, to this place, and kept everybody together.
The lady, Cassie Cooper from Velvet Taco, she sent me the proposed mural they had, and she got a little clearer picture, I think, of you know, what Taco Land meant to a lot of people, and you know, and why it was important, you know, that there was a proper and respectful memorial to Ram here. Initially, I guess it didn't really mean as much to me as it does in retrospect. No, I was 16, 17, 18 when I started playing here.
I came into Taco Land. The first time I ever came to Taco Land, I showed up about 8 o'clock, and there was a biker gang here hanging out, and I was about 16 years old, 17 years old, skipping school. All the wild stories, all the stuff that you think never happened, that's untrue, that's too crazy to happen, happened.
I do remember the last time I played here, and that was, I believe it was New Year's Eve 2000 or December 30th, 2000, and Laura Escamilla, it was around her film about Ram and Taco Land. And I was playing with Texacala Jones of Tex and the Horseheads, who played here back in the 80s, and that was a pretty monster show that I don't remember very much about, but I have some pictures of that remain as proof. You know, if you remember the show, you weren't really here.
It was fuzzy when it happened. It's even fuzzier now.
So Ram's booking policy was unlike any other booking policy I've seen before or since. He would hand you a calendar across the bar top, and you could write your name in.
I would be probably considered the last of the booking guys here at Taco Land. I don't know if you would really consider us bookers of bands here, because it was just a magnet of everything weird and cool and mixed up at the same time. The people like Jeff Smith and myself and Bell and Jerry we'd bring in all these weirdos that didn't fit anywhere else, and they would come and play here, and then some of them made it like commercially or whatever. Who cared about that stuff? And then some of them did it and were just like really huge. I mean, the Butthole Surfers played their first show here.
There were so many bands I saw here. I probably didn't see any more of the kind of name legendary shows. I put on the Minutemen here in 1984.
You had the Murder City Devils. You had Gore play here in their very first tour. You've had, of course, Yo La Tengo is the big, indie band that put out a demo from here. Of course, the Dead Milkmen that wrote the song about Taco Land. But beyond that, I mean, it's just crazy bands from Japan, literally flying off the walls, like climbing the walls, just literally. Bands from Australia, the UK, and then just, the locals alone were just, amazing at what they did. Might not have been good, but it was good. They kicked ass at what they did. That was the beauty of Taco Land.
The really brilliant thing about Taco Land was that the band, a band that could walk into any other club and be about the crappiest band that ever played there could be the greatest band in the world here.
Taco Land only holds 64 people legally, and on any given night, on a good night, we'd have 300 people in here.
And it was like this weird cobbled together place that had been worked on by every drunk electrician and plumber that had walked through the door in the past 30 years, and there wasn't anything the least bit remarkable about it except as a gathering place. It was, acoustically it was awful. It's one of those places, like only a couple other bars I've played in have the distinction where your hands are actually dirtier after you wash them than before. And I guess it just goes to show that you can have a good time anywhere where you're willing to. So it just had like this clubhouse feel where anybody could be a member.
Any type of person could hang out at Taco Land. You had international stars that played here that no one was here to see, and it's just kind of funny that people played this little corner of San Antonio where literally was probably 1,000 square feet, maybe, $2 beers, played on the floor on a shitty PA and rocked harder than any arena in the world, and people would say that, they'd play here and be like, this is the greatest place ever, and it's like, well, there was 10 people here tonight. Well, they don't, but still, like, oh no.
So Taco Land was like one of those places that provided you that ongoing opportunity to improve your musicianship, your craft, and to learn how to entertain people.
I got all of Ram's favorite bands so far, and it's a collection that's still being built. El Santo, like scream punk rock. Suda Buddha was like Middle Eastern psychedelic rock. You'd have a sitar, a guy playing sitar here. Chapstick, some, loud St. Mary's Street rock and roll. Big drag was San Antonio's, punk rock Beach Boys. No, they were really loud, really cool. The infamous Shit City Dream Girls, another experimental band. And of course the Swindos, which so happened to be the last band to play at Taco Land. Great country band, So Taco Land, you could go from avant-art jazz band on a Monday night to a country band on Wednesday to some weirdos here from Japan on Friday, and then we'd all meet here on Sunday and have a barbecue and do it all over again.
If there's a story that you think more people should know about, visit essaypreservation.com/TASH and tell us about it. You can upload photos and audio and link to articles and websites with more information. Just be sure to tick the box indicating that you want to participate in There's a Story Here and include your phone number and an email address so you can receive a marker for your story's location.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of There's a Story Here. See you next time.